Everybody, welcome to the Insurance Journal's Academy of Insurance's weekly webinar after show. I'm your host, George, and joining me for the after show is the director of the Academy of Insurance, Mr. Patrick Raitt. Welcome, Patrick. And today's instructor. Today's class is that covered on your farm liability form. And the instructor for today is Mr. Casey Roberts. Casey, welcome to the after show. Great to have you back. And it's been a bit.
It has been a bit, but I love how you did that. That was spectacular.
Well, Academy members and people that look up this class, you will see that is all in caps. So that's why I gave you with that kind of thing. So, Casey, welcome and thank you for a tremendously. There you go, perfect. You don't even have to look it up. But we encourage you to because it was a really, really great class, very informative, knowledge laden. You compared agribusiness, insuring it to Neapolitan ice cream at one point, and gave us more of a glimpse into your sommelier kind of your interest in wine. So a little bit of a fourth wall breakdown of Casey Roberts. We get to know more of the real Casey. But Casey, I was wondering, you talked about agribusiness and farm insurance, and you talked about agritainment, agritourism, agribusiness. I had a question for you because we go to California at least once a year, my family and I, and we try to go to Knott's Berry Farm.
Okay.
Because Knott's Berry Farm has wonderful chicken dinners and everything like that. And the history of Knott's was rooted in farming, but then it was Dr. Boysen invented the boysenberry on that piece of land, and then Mrs. Knott's chicken dinners were bringing people in from miles around, and Mr. Knott said, well, we might as well build something for them to do while they're waiting for the chicken dinners, and that's where Knott's Berry Farm sprung from.
I got to stop you right now.
Okay.
There was a Dr. Boysen?
There was a Rudolph Boysen.
I did not know that. Seriously.
Nope, Rudolph Boysen. Rudolph Boysen was the name, I think.
He must have hybridized a berry into the boysenberry then.
Absolutely.
I'll be darned. Oh, cool. Good to know. Thanks.
So I don't know if they rezone that land or is Knott's Berry Farm, because I don't think it's much of a working farm anymore, but no. Is that considered agritainment, agribusiness, anything anymore? Or
that would on probably a mega scale. Yeah, that would have been, going from the berry farm to everything else they're doing, right? And they've got a amusement park there, do they not?
They do.
Right, so you've got the amusement park, you've got restaurants, you've got Lord knows what else going on there. Yeah, that would be agribusiness or agritainment, if you will, on a mega scale. Yeah,
gotcha.
It's funny if you're I'm up here in Northern California, north of Sacramento. If I were to jump on Interstate 5 and head down to Stockton, just beyond Stockton, south of Stockton, on the western side of the highway, there's a place that started out as a farm that now has rides, a restaurant, etc., and is exactly the same type of concept where it just started out as a farm, and now the last thing, it's a farm in name only, if you will. Yeah.
Before our after show, I didn't look up the definition for agriculture, but you made the distinction between agriculture and aquaculture. So agriculture to me is plants. If you harvest plankton, is that considered aquaculture or agriculture? Let me say aqua.
That would be aquaculture.
Aqua, even though it's a plant.
Yeah,
because it grows in the sea.
Okay. It's grown in the water. Yeah, the aquaculture that we normally see there would be like if I've got an oyster farm along the coast.
Yep.
Something of that, or if I'm raising catfish, which is something that happens down in the southern portions of our nation, catfish farms and all. That's normally what we expect with aquaculture. But if the underwriter agrees that they want to go ahead and provide something, oyster coverage for my oyster farm off the coast, then that would qualify as aquaculture.
Oyster coverage. I love it. Casey, thank you so much again for everything today. Patrick, what do you think of farm insurance in general and Knott's Berry Farm and aquatainment? I thought I'd ask you about that.
So, aquatainment to me seems very risky. So, because, water is risky.
Right.
Two, Knott's Berry Farm. All I could think of is George lobbing knowledge grenades at us was Dr. Boysen.
Exactly.
Rudolph
And
Boysen.
I've been thinking a lot about this is great timing, because a week ago I was in Kansas, and they have a lot of farm insurance needs in that part of the country. And I've got a brother-in-law that's involved. Has a little family farm and they have farm insurance. So this is recently very up front and center in life in general. But I find it very interesting that it seems like the modern small to kind of medium-sized family farm operation, what they're doing is not what's contemplated by kind of the standard farming insurance policies that ISO or AAIS or any of the other organizations have been writing for who knows how long. There's been an evolution to this thing, because as you said, Casey, it's more than just people farming and other people coming by a roadside stand or a shed. I mean, my brother-in-law's got a shed where people come in and they not only purchase his produce, but he purchases produce to resell. He's got, during different times of the year, you were talking about strawberries, Casey. They're in the height of the U-pick strawberry season, and other items like that. And it's amazing to me that the one thing that you said, what are they doing? Whatever they can to make some money, because I mean, everybody wants to make a buck, and it seems like no matter how badly you or I may not want to pick things, people will pay for the privilege to pick their own produce.
Two of my most informative summers were my junior and senior high school years summers, when I worked on a farm that was a corporate farm owned by Del Monte Corporation. You might have heard of them. And working those 2 summers with cucumbers, tomatoes, and pears. How's that for a spread, right? Mm-hmm. I found out something about farming that I hadn't been exposed to previously. I didn't want it for a living. That's damn hard work. The hours are long. It's very rewarding work. And, one of my favorite sayings is that if you're going to criticize a farmer, you're not allowed to do it with your mouth full.
Absolutely.
Yes,
absolutely.
Yeah. But, you were talking about agritainment and all, and it's funny. In what was this? In American Agriculturist, which is one of the online feeds I get, there was an article yesterday by a guy by the name of Michael Kilpatrick, who evidently is a farmer and an educator of other farmers. And he was talking about things that they had to be aware of, labor and inflation and marketing, et cetera. And then 2 of the things he talked about at the very end, one he talked about was agritourism, because that's what he does on a 400-acre farm outside of Dayton, Ohio. And the other thing he called it a $3,000 gamble, putting in a simple kitchen, and so that you could go ahead and turn your raw products into something else. And I'm looking at that, and the only thing I actually looked him up today, and I sent him an email. I don't know if I'll get a response. I just said, I appreciated your article. It was great. It was well put together. I wish you would have said something about, hey, when they start doing what you mentioned with the agritourism and changing the product, they better check with their insurance agent, because they don't have coverage for it. So it was just so timely of a read in that regard. I meant to mention it today's class, but I ran out of time.
That's interesting. You were talking about mechanically changing the product, and the question that George had brought up about pickers. My brother-in-law has got a picker that does beans. He does beans, peas, the kind of beans that you'd have in like a bean soup or whatever. And his machine will go through and pick them. And he's also got another machine that will get the beans out of their husks and hulls and separate them, is that mechanically changing the product, or is that still under that?
That's probably still going to be okay under the farm liability coverage form. Okay. I'd want some clarity for how the claims department of the particular carrier would look at that. I wouldn't consider that necessarily processing any more than I would when I'm harvesting corn out of a field in the combine, that the ears are picked and then the corn is taken off the ear, if you will, and ends up just in a big bin of corn. That they've processed it per se, but they haven't really changed the actual product. So I would say no.
Okay. And of course, we understand that maybe is an appropriate answer here because of all the details it could be into, like you said, the company's philosophy and what they look at, and the conversation with the adjuster at the time if there is a loss or anything like that. So yeah. I mean, I saw a great T-shirt when I was out at the convention, and it's on the front simply said, "It depends."
Yeah.
That's the answer to 90% of insurance questions.
Well, that is true. Plus, the other thing to remember, as a good friend of mine would say, depends is more than just an undergarment.
Well, I'd like to, with that, I'd like to conclude this by asking one more quick question, Casey, if that's okay. So you mentioned that junior and senior year, you worked on a farm, cucumbers, pears. When I read your introduction, a lot of the policies are topics that are more popular that we cover, but farm insurance kind of leaped out at me. And then you said something about working. Did that begin your interest in this kind of policy, or just curious?
I was born and raised in a farming community,
Okay.
10,000 people at the time in Northern California. And when I first got into insurance, I actually got hired by a company called Farmers Insurance. And I don't believe that Farmers Insurance handles insurance for farmers anymore. I do not believe they do, but at the time they did. And so being in a farming community and being exposed to it, it was just a natural interest. And the one thing, George, probably that I respect the most, and this is true in most businesses, but especially true in dealing with farm operators. You say, Mr. Farmer, Miss Farmer, we've got a deal, right? And they go, right, and you shake on it. That's all you need. That's all you need. There are still people that, yeah, you're going to have a contract and you got to live with the contract, et cetera. But a handshake still means something with those folks. And that just really resonates with me in the way I was raised. So.
From Depends to Rudolph Boysen to Oyster Insurance to the fact that Farmers Insurance may or may not still write farmers policies anymore. Casey, it's always a blast having you on the after show, and it's really, really great having you help us out, and you're really a positive addition to our faculty, if you will. So thank you again so much for your time today and for your sort of your warmth and insight and everything like that. We always really appreciate it. So thank you.
George, you guys are just terrific, in my opinion, because you allow someone such as me to go ahead and share my thoughts. So I appreciate what you folks bring to the overall industry that I just love. So thank you both.
The pleasure's ours. So thanks, Casey. On behalf of Casey Roberts, today's instructor, and our director, Mr. Patrick Raitt, this is George, your host, saying thanks, everyone, and we will see you next time. Take care of yourselves. Have a great day, everyone.